Ajemian. He's a historian, educator, journalist, and his career is defined by deep expertise in Middle Eastern and American history. He's been teaching for more than half of his career, and he has worked in education, teaching at the high school level and also the college level. His teaching is often connected with historical events and contemporary issues, and he's been known for integrating multimedia and real-world relevance into his classes. Ray has also worked as a journalist, contributing articles to the Michigan Daily, where he wrote on political strategy, social unrest, and cultural controversies. His writing often addressed current issues with historical context, reflecting his dual background in education and journalism. His career blends academic rigor with public engagement, making him a bridge between scholarly research and accessible historical education. His work continues to influence both students and the broader public through teaching, writing, and advocacy. Please welcome joining me. I had a rough night.
Whoa. First of all, can you hear me without the mic? I don't like the mic. I don't like technology at all, to tell you the truth, and I just messed up already. As a way of introduction, I'm not a journalist. I'm not sure where that came from. Not at all?
I apologize.
No, that's all right. And I noticed on the advertisement for this, it said Professor Ajemian. I'm not a professor either. So I may be, all right. My background is I have taught history in high school and community college. I taught here up to, I don't know, what it was, 10 years ago? I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. I was teaching here and Massasoit. My background, though, is Middle Eastern history. I have 2 degrees from the University of Michigan. I don't know, maybe that's where you got that. One in Middle Eastern history. The University of Michigan does have a Middle Eastern history department separate from that. Okay, that also.
You should use that mic because I'm having trouble hearing you. So some people got.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's better. All right. I'll do the technology then. Where was I? Middle Eastern history is obviously complicated, but the other thing I want to mention is I'm Armenian. Therefore, in terms of the history side, you may say I'm biased because I'm talking about something that's controversial today, and I'm Armenian. If you're a good historian, you should be able to divest yourself of your own bias when you do research, and I try to. So what I'm going to give you today, I think, is generally accepted, and I'll touch at the end the controversy involved with the Armenian genocide, okay? And by the way, I'll mention at the end, but Armenians tend to commemorate the genocide on April 24th, which is tomorrow. And I'm not sure about Providence, but Boston has a commemoration at the State House tomorrow. All right. I don't know. I can't see anything. Let's start. First of all, just a quick tidbit of history here. I don't know if you ever heard of Admiral Mahan, who was a 19th century, early 20th century admiral who wrote an important book on the influence of sea power in the world. He coined the term Middle East. Just want to mention that to you because if you think about it, if you live in the Middle East, what's middle? Yeah. It's a European-centered term that started in the United States that the British caught on. Of course, British owned everything at the time, and it just stuck. We have the near, it used to be called Near East, Far East, and Middle East. So. All right, just briefly about Armenians. We tend to categorize people by their language grouping today, and if you notice, like Arabic is a Semitic language. Hebrew is Semitic language. So in terms of languages, the Jews and the Arabs are related. Persian is an Indo-European language. English is an Indo-European language, and so is Armenian. So I'm just trying to just give you an idea of the background in terms of what we're talking about here. So Armenian is an Indo-European language, is related to the Western European languages. I can't see what I'm doing here. Armenian goes back before the time of Christ, where the Armenian considers itself the first country to accept Christianity. It's been a Christian nation since 301 CE, and it's a very small country in the Middle East. Today it's considered, actually today, after World War I, the movement of Armenia in terms of its borders, it's considered in Europe, not the Middle East anymore. If you look at the map here, the map on the left shows the modern Middle East. Armenia would be up at the very top in the center, highlighted on the right-hand side. It's surrounded by Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. And Armenia has issues with every one of the countries, unfortunately, today. In the Middle Ages, there was an Armenian kingdom that held part of the Middle East. As you can see here, in terms of holding land very long, the Armenians were not able to because of stronger groups that came through the Middle East. If you go to Armenia today, or even eastern Turkey, you will see ruins of Armenian churches that are still there. That's Aktamar, which is on an island. It's in Turkey. The city of Ani, which was built in the 10th century. It's a deserted. It's not a city anymore. It's just ruins. But if you go to eastern Turkey today, it's there. In Cilicia, which is if you go at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, the northeast end, it's called Cilicia. Armenians settled there. And when the crusading armies came from Europe into the Middle East to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims, the Armenians, being a Christian nation, there helped the Crusaders. Just give you a quick background. Okay, in the 13th century, the Ottoman Turks came in. The Arabs were there, Seljuk Turks came in, and what happened? Dangerous with this thing. The Ottoman Turks came in. They conquered the entire Middle East, including North Africa, and they held it for centuries. 14th, they expanded into the Balkans, as you probably know. If you go to the Balkans today, you'll see mosques, and obviously the Balkans, if you know the 1990s, is a very difficult area in terms of religion. I mean, there's been interfighting between various groups there constantly. Okay, the Ottoman Turks held the Middle East for centuries. By the 18th century, there was the beginning of a decline. Europe was on the rise. Europe was beginning industrialization, and they were not. And so you see a decline, and the European powers, in particular the British, looked upon the Middle East as an important area for them. The British, remember, their main colony was India. And so if you're going to get to India, the Middle East is there. The Panama Canal is built, the Suez Canal is built in the 19th century by the French. British take it over. My point is that there's a decline of the Turks and the rise of Europe at this time. When the Turks, they took Constantinople in 1453, they set up an interesting system now. If you look at the Ottoman Empire in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, they had numerous peoples there. Obviously, the Arabs were there first. The Turks had come in. There were Armenians. There were Greeks. There were Jews. There were some Albanians. There were Kurds. A number of different people. And they set up the millet system, which was an interesting way of dealing with minorities. And that is, they said to the minorities, you can take care of yourself. In other words, if you have a dispute, if there were two Armenians and they had a dispute with each other, the Armenian church officials could settle the dispute, not the Turkish officials. If there were a dispute between a Turk and Armenian, then the Turks would step in. They were not allowed in the army in the beginning. They had different clothing, and they had to pay a tax. So you had what, on the surface, was an ability of various minorities, in particular the Armenians, to rule themselves in a wider country. In reality, they're second-class citizens, though, in this process. And they did. They set up various shops in terms of shoes and other clothing and so forth. Then in the 19th century, the Ottomans were really in a decline. Russia attacked in the east 3 times. There were wars between the Ottomans and the Russians 3 times, and the Ottomans lost 3 times. The British, if you remember, the Crimean War was there, came in at that time. The Suez Canal was built. The British took over Egypt. They were in definite decline, and there was an attempt in the beginning to reform the Ottoman Empire into more of a European model, called the Tanzimat reforms. The last sultan was Abdul Hamid, was the picture on the right. And they went after some of the minorities now. By the end of the 19th century, some of the minorities, in particular the Armenians, were attacked. The villages were attacked by various bands. The Kurds were allowed to attack them. In other words, the government allowed attacks on various groups, in particular in 1895. And the European powers referred to the Ottomans as the sick man of Europe, and the question was how to divide it up. What are we going to make this into? Well, who's going to get what? This is the Ottoman Empire at the height of its expansion. Part of North Africa into the Balkans. Again, if you look at the Balkan states today, there are remnants of the Muslims there. As you probably know, they attacked Vienna twice and couldn't take it. This is their height. By the time of World War I, the Ottomans were in definite decline. Okay, you can see the recession that the Ottoman Empire went into by 1914. The question was whether they'd even be able to hold the empire together, what was left of the empire. And what happened was there were certain trends that led to the genocide. One, by the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, they lose the Balkans. Greece declares its independence early in the 19th century. They fight a war against the Turks and win. And various Baltic states, by the end of the 19th century into the beginning of the 20th century, also revolt against the Ottomans and win. So the Ottomans get pushed back. The Armenians, they're in the eastern portion of the Ottoman Empire. They relate more to Europe than they do to the Ottomans. They're Christians. They look to France, Germany, England for help, and they want. And in some cases, there are revolutionary groups that form among the Armenians that want to have an independent Armenian state in eastern Turkey. Of course, that's out of the question in terms of Turks' mind. Also, there's a beginning of this idea of pan-Turkism. In other words, the idea of uniting Turks and Muslims right across the Central Asia and the Middle East. What happens in 1908 is the Sultan Hamid is overthrown by a group called the Young Turks. You heard that term before. Sometimes there was a guy on TV. Wasn't he at one time called himself a Young Turk? Opinion guy. Anyway. And the Young Turks realized that the Sultan was not going to change things, and they revolted. They overthrew him, and they formed their own government. And they want to change. At the first, what they say is, we want this new country, in a sense, to be a multi-ethnic one. In other words, everybody will be welcomed. All minority groups will have equal say. Civil rights will be for everybody. It turns quickly into the idea of pan-Turkism. These 3 men were the head of what is called the Young Turks at the time, that governed Turkey from the beginning of the 20th century to the end of World War I and the end of the Ottoman Empire. And they, in particular the man on the right, were the ones that decided upon and planned the genocide. World War I, in my opinion, was a defining event of the last 100 years or so. Everything changed after World War I, if you think about it. You probably wouldn't have had, you may not have had communism, and you probably definitely would not have had Hitler if World War I did not occur. The Allied powers in World War I, as you probably know, Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and the United States, and we were late into the war. The Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottomans came in the end. They came in, well, I shouldn't say at the end, they were late. They were a few months late in declaring war, but they allied themselves with Germany, partly because the Germans were in the Ottoman Empire prior to World War I and helping build railroads and so forth. And what happens is, you have to understand this, that the Turks, once they're in the war, they decide to declare war on Russia. And Enver Pasha, one of the men I showed you, leads an army in the winter, without winter clothes, to the eastern portions of the empire and tries to attack Russia. The Russian army was there, and the Turks had a devastating loss. They simply were not prepared for the winter, and the Russians outnumbered them, and they beat them. The British, as you're probably aware of, attacked at Gallipoli, the underbelly of the Germans, in a sense, to go through Turkey. It was a failure. They also attacked up in Mesopotamia. It was the first invasion was a failure. The Turks realized that they were under pressure now, and so things changed. Talat Pasha he was suspicious of non-Muslims. He wanted the Turkish homeland. In other words, he didn't want non-Turks around. He was a social Darwinist, and he is considered the main architect of the genocide. And these are the stages. Now, if you know the history of genocide in general, some of these apply to other genocides. First of all, you disarm. You make sure the people you want to get rid of don't have the ability to fight back, so you disarm them. You eliminate the Armenians in the army. In World War I, they were brought into the army, which they did. In other words, the Armenians in the army were first put into work details and then murdered. Leaders, you round up the leaders. You don't want, if you kill off the top, the leaders, then you hope that any movement on the part of the people you're going after will subside. Mass arrests, deportation, and murder. This is the stages that took place in terms of the genocide. And in April 24th, 1915, some of the leaders, Armenian leaders, not just leaders, but people of wealth and so forth, were rounded up and murdered. And this is just a picture of some of the ones that were. It was the beginning of the genocide. I give you the village of Ajemian. I didn't tell you, but I will mention it again. My mother was a survivor of the genocide, and she grew up in this village. And the Turkish troops went through the village. They confiscated weapons. They ordered men to the church at night. There were two churches in Ajemian. One, the Armenian Orthodox Church, and the other was a Congregationalist church. And the Congregationalist church, and I don't know if you're aware of, American missionaries, British missionaries, Danish missionaries went to the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century in large numbers, set up schools and so forth, and they converted. They couldn't convert the Turks to Christianity, but they converted Armenians from Armenian Orthodox to various other Christian sects. And women and children were eventually forced to leave. This is the only photograph that I did it again, that I know of the deportations. This was taken by a German. Now remember, I told you that the Turks allied themselves with Germany, and the German army was already there. And this was taken by a German officer from a building, and it shows the Armenians being led out from the city of Harput, which is central Turkey. And this map shows the general area of the genocide. The large orange circles are where the killings took place in general. The marches. In any genocide, there is sometimes resistance to it. In the Armenian genocide, there are basically two. One in the city of Van, which is in the eastern portion of the Ottoman Empire, and the other in Musadag, which is a mountain on the Mediterranean Sea. And the villagers in Musadag, when they realized that there was killing going on near them, they climbed the mountain and they defended themselves against the Turkish army when they approached. And they eventually were saved by a French warship offshore that took them on. And it was memorialized in a sense by Franz Werfel, who is a Jew from, I believe, Austria-Hungary, who wrote the book, The 40 Days of Musadag. But it's a historical fiction. It's based on a real event, but he puts characters into the book. Results of the genocide, it depends who you read today, but roughly 1.5 million Armenians were killed. Thousands were refugees in other countries. And what's interesting is this, that I had the last point, New York life insurance. During the early 20th century, New York Life went to the Middle East, and in particular the Ottoman Empire, was selling life insurance policies to Armenians, and they bought them. And once the genocide occurred, and after the fact, back in the 1990s, a lot of some Armenians that held these policies went to New York Life and said, hey, you know, we have relatives that died, pay up, and they refused. They refused to pay up, and this is an aside to this. They went to court in 2004. New York Life paid $20 million to various, but they had to go to court. They refused to pay until the court. I just want to stress, not just Armenians were killed. There are other peoples were killed too. The Greeks, the Syrians, the Saurians, and so forth at this time. The largest number were Armenians, though. Eyewitnesses. As I'm going to get into, whether this was a genocide is controversial today. I just want to bring the important point to you. There were eyewitnesses to the genocide. First of all, the survivors themselves. They talked about it and they wrote about it. Well, let me just go back. The survivors, the German army officers, American missionaries, and American government officials were all saw what was going on. There were Turks that witnessed what was going on and they recorded it and they were against it. I don't want to give you the impression that all Turks were trying to kill Christians and so forth. That was not the case. This is just a comment from a Turkish army officer. Turkish governor, one of the provinces, he saved Armenians. He was criticized for it, but he did because he felt it was the thing to do. But the survivors wrote accounts. There I go again. Wrote accounts of what happened, and they are printed today, and they simply record of their life under the Turks and what happened during the genocide. Wenger, it was a German nurse for the German army in the Ottoman Empire. He secretly took pictures of what was happening. It was illegal to take them out of the country. He snuck them out. So he also recorded instances of the genocide. These are his pictures. The missionaries. It's a whole different topic, but the United States, by the United States Constitution, does not have an official religion, and we don't support any religion, but we are a nation that is religious, in some ways strongly religious. And during the beginning of the 19th century, American missionaries went in large numbers to various places, in particular the Middle East. And converting a Muslim to Christianity was near impossible, but they did, as I just said before, converted Armenians to usually Congregationalists. And they were there during the genocide. So they also recorded what happened. Euphrates College was there, which was built by missionaries. And usually the professors were Armenian, and most of the students were Christians. The Robert College in Istanbul was created by missionaries. It's still there today, folks. It's still operating today in Istanbul. The Armenian College for Girls was set up in Istanbul. It's combined with Robert College today. I love it. The 19th century and the early 20th century, everybody posed for pictures. We don't do that much anymore, but it's really great. If you look at some of the 19th century American pictures, you'll see farmers out west. They're sitting in front of their sod house. They're very poor, husband, wife, cow, all standing there looking at the camera. Anyway, the various missionaries wrote their accounts. Atkinson, in particular, wrote accounts, lengthy accounts of what she saw of the genocide. The United States, whether you realize or not, when we went to war in 1917, we did not declare war against the Turks. And that was partly because the missionaries were there. We never declared war, but we had government officials there throughout the time. These were two consuls in the Ottoman Empire at the time. And the ambassador, Henry Morgenthau, an American Jew, was there. I'll come back to him in a minute. He's an important man. In other words, all the records of all the sites of what was going on filtered into Istanbul, where he was, okay, into Constantinople at the time. And these men wrote their accounts of what happened, and you can pick them up today. The Slaughterhouse Province, written by Leslie Davis, the consul at the time. He documents the killings that took place in his area. It's interesting, he talked about biased and unbiased views. He didn't like Armenians in particular, but he documented the fact that Armenians were being rounded up, taken to a nearby lake, and killed. Morgenthau is the ambassador, so he constantly talks to Talat Pasha throughout this process. The fact that it's now getting to the American officials and missionaries, it means it gets to the American press also. So the genocide, the killings that are taking place, is publicized in the American press, in particular the New York Times. This is 1915, 1916. And what happens is, typical of Americans, they form groups and committees to try to do something. And the Near East Relief is formed to send aid, not just to Armenians, but people suffering in the Middle East. And you have posters that were sent out trying to raise money to send goods to the Armenians and so forth in the Middle East. And it works. Missionaries are there. Places are set up for the survivors. Orphanages are set up. This picture was taken in 1921 in Aleppo, Syria. And the Near East Relief is still operating today. It's called the Near East Foundation. Today, I just want to point out that what started in 1915-16 continues today. The fact that the genocide took place, the fact that the Ottomans or the Turks lost the war and Germany lost the war, there was a push to help the Armenians and others, and the idea was to create a country of Armenia. And if you know anything about the end of World War I, Woodrow Wilson, of course, issued his famous 14 points, which were totally rejected by the United States Senate, so he never became part of the League of Nations. But he did attempt to create Armenia, and it failed. So there was no Armenian state created by the United States at the time. Now, what happens also, which is interesting here, is there really is an attempt to prosecute the Turkish leaders. We don't have the word genocide yet, but obviously there's mass killing. And the Allied powers, the British, French, mainly, decide they want to prosecute them. And trials are taking place in Constantinople, Istanbul, right after the war to try them. And the trials started, and they were legitimate trials, and they eventually fell apart. And nobody was punished. But it set a precedent. You know the Holocaust? And what I'm saying here is that the idea of going after leaders of a nation that started a war, that committed crimes, and have them be found guilty, starts here. The Nuremberg trials at the end of World War II comes after this. The term crimes against humanity begins at this time, partly because of the Armenian genocide, but there are other issues too. But I'm just saying the term is created at the beginning of the 20th century. The Armenians take the law in their own hands. They form a secret group, and they say, look, we know who started this, and we're going to kill them. So a group is formed to go after those three leaders that I mentioned to you, the main one being Talat Pasha. When the war came to an end, Talat Pasha knew things were not going to be good for him, so he fled. He went to Germany, he went to Berlin to escape. And the Armenians tracked him down, and Talleyrand found a little room near where Talat Pasha was staying. And one day when Talat Pasha went for a walk, Talleyrand walked up to him, put a bullet in his head, and killed him. He was immediately jumped on by German civilians, and he was tried for murder. His defense was that the Turks, and under the leadership of Talat Pasha, murdered his entire family, and they let him go. and he ended up in this country. You've heard of Lemkin. I bring Lemkin up, a Polish Jew. He's studying law, and he's in class, and question comes to his mind. He asks his professor, he says, look, if one person kills another person in this country, they're tried for murder. And he says, yeah. The professor says, yeah. But what happens when a government kills its own people? What is that? And the professor says, well, nothing, because governments can do what they want with their own people. He doesn't like that. So the term genocide, he invents the term genocide. He spends his life trying to convince, in particular the United Nations, to accept it. He dies in poverty, but the United States Convention in 1948 defines genocide. So the word genocide is invented by Lemkin, and it is in our vocabulary today. And it's controversial, as you know, because you know what's going on right now. Some people say it's genocide, some people not say it's genocide, and so forth. I'm not going to go either way. I'm just saying it's there. We have a name, a definition of genocide now, and that's the United Nations. Acknowledgement, getting more into the issues now, is considered important. The idea of denying a genocide, the killings have taken place, is important. It hurts the people that were the victims, and it perpetuates further genocide. This was said prior to the invasion of Poland. All right, today, let me try to give you some of the issues today if you're not aware of them. Turkish government denies anything happened. Denies that a genocide took place, denies that any mass killing took place. This is off their website today. These are the arguments. They're usually used to deny a genocide took place, not just the Armenian, but other genocides. Armenians consider recognition important. Whether it changes anything or not is questionable, but they consider it important. These countries have recognized the Armenian genocide, and they've always pressured the United States to recognize it. And at first, the United States Congress did. Samantha Power was a diplomat under Obama, if you probably know. She wrote a book in the 90s, A Problem from Hell. And it's a good book describing how the United States has a problem dealing with genocides and things like that. Because obviously any nation is political, we want to deal with other countries, and you don't want to irritate countries too much over issues like this. But President Obama, when he was running for president, said he was going to recognize the genocide if he was elected. He was elected and he did not. And he was criticized for that among Armenians. But Biden finally recognized the genocide 5 years ago. So the United States officially has also recognized the Armenian genocide. Israel has not. The Armenians criticize Israel for that, considering the fact that they went through a Holocaust. But again, it's no secret to you that countries are political in what they say and do. So, Tamer Atkin is a professor at Clark University today. He's Turkish. He's a Turkish professor that has done superb work on the Armenian genocide. And he came out in 2017. It was in the New York Times on the front page. And you see one of the defense of people that want to defend themselves against the claim of genocide is, well, find the orders that say that we did anything. It may have happened by individuals, but no government orders. And the Turks issue usually two sets of orders. One that was not very damaging and one that was. He found one. For the first time, he found a definite order from the Turkish, from Istanbul to someplace within Turkey about the killings. Today, my little lecture here. I would argue that governments, no matter what government it is, liberal, conservative, American, Russian, Polish, whatever, should never write history. If governments write history, they write it their way. They always minimize the negative and accentuate the positive. An example. Whoops. Made a mistake. There's the first picture. I mixed them up. The gentleman on the right is a young man with Stalin. For some reason or other, he was pushed out of his place within the government, and they wiped him out of the picture. That happens. If we do it in different ways, but we do. If you look at American history that was written prior to the Civil Rights Movement and see what was written about blacks in this history, it was pretty bad. Luckily, it's much better now, although things seem to be changing back again. Today, I'm just giving you a little advertisement here, my own opinion. What is happening in Washington, I think, is atrocious. If you're a historian at all, they're rewriting history by government decree. And it shouldn't be done, and it's dangerous. But it's going on right now. In particular, blacks, women have been, the actual history that's been done by historians and so forth is being rewritten. All right, April 24th, it's tomorrow, which is the remembrance for Armenians. If you've been to Boston, the Armenian Heritage Park is on the Greenway in Boston. I don't know if you've ever been there. It was built when the Greenway was built, financed by Armenians in the area, and it commemorates the genocide. And there's a monument there they changed it welcomes immigrants to this country, but it's a memorial to the genocide. State House, they have a commemoration every April 24th. There will be one tomorrow in Boston. Okay, lastly, some personal things. First of all, bystanders. I just tossed this out. If you know the Holocaust or any genocide, the killings did not simply take place by army units and special killing units. They took place by bystanders too, or people. I should say people, normal citizens that did the killings. You wonder about people. What about people around them? Why didn't they say something? And we can't answer that now. It's too long of a discussion. But it happens in every situation like that. People, for whatever reason, don't respond. They look the other way. If the people that are being persecuted have been demonized for years, then it's easier to look the other way. I just bring it up because it happened in the Armenian genocide. It happens all the time. It happened in this country in terms of killing of blacks and so forth. I like this. This is a description of Morgenthal's discussion with Talat Pasha, and I think it's what you would want to see from every American diplomat. In other words, take a moral stand on issues. Two things. Okay, last two slides. Here's a picture of a bunch of Armenians, Armenian family. Pictures can tell you a lot sometimes if you look at them carefully. Can you see anything there? Any significance? I don't know who they are, by the way. It's just, if you study pictures, anything unusual there? And there's meaning behind this photograph.
Absence of man of a certain age.
I'm sorry?
An absence of man of a certain age.
True. No men there, but that's not the point. Sorry.
No one smiled.
No one, they ever smile. No, they don't.
The gentleman is not wearing any shoes.
Ah, there we go. Keep going. You're missing one thing.
He has the roses.
No, that's not unusual.
No.
The no shoes on is one clue. There's one more.
His shoes are on the board.
His shoes are on the boy. What does it signify then?
That the boy is in charge, the man of the house.
That the man is old. He is shifting the leadership, not to the women, not to the women, guys. It's going to the male. He may be, I don't know if he's the oldest male or what. We don't know. I don't know the background of this picture. But the significance is he has his grandfather's shoes on. And he is, and watch too, yeah, that's right. And watch too. And he is going to be the next head of the family. And you know, it's the kid that's sitting in the middle too. And the guy's off to the side. You can tell a lot about pictures there, but through big photographs. All right, last one. The woman sitting there is my grandmother. She died in the genocide in the center. The young girl off to her right is my mother. And the gentleman in the back is her son, who was killed in the genocide. But my grandmother, through the help of friendly Muslim families, Turkish families, saved the children, and so they survived. And my mother eventually ended up in an orphanage in Beirut, an American orphanage there after the war. And she had two brothers in the United States already, and they found her and they brought her to this country. So that's it. Thank you. Any questions? Questions? Yeah. Well, up and back first.
I'm going to embarrass myself and ask a very basic question that maybe you addressed at the beginning, but I missed it. Why would the Turks so angry, so against the Armenians? I know there were some other people that were also massacred, but like you said, it was primarily Armenians. What did they do that they were so hated?
Well, what did blacks do in this country that?
Exactly.
Yeah. What did the Jews do in Poland and Germany? The Armenians were different, for one thing, and being different, being a minority that's different, is a problem in any country, can be. The Armenians were not Muslim. That was important. They had their own way of doing things, and there were revolutionary movements in eastern Turkey by Armenians. I can't deny that. There were some Armenian groups that carried guns that felt that there should be an Armenia in eastern Turkey. But that wasn't the main thing. They were second-class citizens, and I think the lesson there, in my opinion, is if you have a group and you make them into second-class citizens, then they're in danger at some point. So, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah. Wait a minute, here.
Oh, I was just going to say that, I mean, it grew and went on during World War I because the Western countries were focused on France and fighting the Germans and weren't sending really anybody in that 4 or 5 year period.
Yeah.
Down there, the Germans weren't condoning it either.
Right.
So it allowed it to escalate till the early 1920s.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, if you look at genocide, it usually takes place during wartime. Wartime is a cover to go after your own people. It really is. Nobody's going to complain. You know about the Holocaust, whether Roosevelt knew what was going on or not, but he wasn't going to do anything. He didn't do anything. Back there? Yeah.
So I enjoyed the presentation very much. I am Armenian, and my grandmother fled Harput. She may have been in that picture.
Could be. Was she in the city or a village?
Oh, I'm not sure. I knew she was from Harput,
Yeah.
and she met her husband here. He fled Malacha also,
Yeah.
Armenian. He came first, got a job here. He came when he was 15, worked in a shoe factory, and
Yeah.
sent half his salary of $4 a week back to Armenia. And he was the oldest boy. The next oldest came, and they both worked and sent half their money back, but they were the
Yeah.
only two that made it out.
That's true. And that's not unusual for immigrants in general. I mean, whether you're Italian or Portuguese or whatever, you did that. Yeah, that's true. Anybody else? Yeah.
This is probably a little naive of me, but is there going to be a reckoning vis-a-vis Turkey with this great diaspora in the world, organization-wise, with Armenians, to have some sort of
I don't know. I mean, probably not in my lifetime. I mean, I just read this week that Turkey is just inaugurating air flights between Istanbul and Yerevan, Armenia, which you say, well, is that a big deal? Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. The border between Armenia and Turkey is closed. It's been closed forever. It's not open. Maybe. I don't know. It's if you talk about the genocide in Turkey today, you're in trouble. You don't do it.
What's the population in Turkey of Armenians?
The last thing I heard was about 50,000, mainly in Istanbul. There are Armenians there. The country of Armenians only a couple million, that's all.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just interestingly, on social media in Germany, it's going kind of viral. Turks have had their DNA done and found out that they're not actually Turkish, that they have Armenian, Chaldean, Assyrian, and their minds are blown because they've been taught all these generations that they've been Turkish, and lo and behold, the story of the genocide is unraveling within their own family DNA history.
Oh, that's true. I mean, if we all look at our DNA, we probably have a lot of different groups that we didn't realize. But at the same time, I think people that have fixated in their mind one way of thinking, that's not going to change their mind. But I don't know.
Well, I think it's changing for a lot of young
Maybe.
Turks. Well, they might be second generation grown up in Germany and they have access now to the DNA, they're starting to ask questions because back in Turkey you can't have this conversation, whereas in Germany there's more freedom to have that conversation of, you know, where are we from and what does this mean now that I'm finding out that half my DNA or more is Armenian or Chaldean or Greek. What happened then to the family? Why were we told we were Turkish? Or what happened to our relatives? Were the women kidnapped and sex slaves to Turks? And therefore now I'm the byproduct of this. So this is a conversation going on currently in Germany.
Well, I also think that with that, the younger people in Turkey will then hopefully be somewhat, their interest will be piqued to learn and to discover on their own, as opposed to, as you said, the state-written history of the country, right? The state-written history is, nothing of that is ever taught. So this, it
It's
gives
a revolution within.
yeah, they can start asking those questions.
Well, you know, the problem of state-written history is you're never going to get away from that completely. I mean, you know, people will say if you get them young, then you got them. And you look at American history textbooks, we don't like to talk about slavery or killing Indians and so forth. Or, you know, how many kids have heard of the King Philip's War in this area? You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for mentioning Samantha Power's book. I think her work is extremely important. I don't think enough people understand how the United States has not engaged with the Genocide Convention. And I really think that it was important for you to bring that up, and I think that we should have more conversations about how the United States skirts its responsibility to the international community.
Right. Absolutely, you're absolutely correct. I would only add one thing though, and maybe sort of a negative. They're never going to do it unless they're pressured. Governments won't do things unless they're pressured. And if you don't pressure them, it's not going to happen.
That's right.
You have to do it.
There's so many treaties that we haven't signed, haven't ratified,
I know.
haven't sent to the Senate. And like while we ratified the convention in the 80s, you know, as Powers pointed out, there's been, you know, like we added so many reservations to it, we watered it down so completely as it's ineffective. So it's just ridiculous.
What can I say? I mean,
But I was saying thank you for mentioning her work. It was,
yeah.
that was quite a...
Yeah, she's important, yeah. She's done good work.
I was going to ask you to mention your Yeli's wife, the young woman in the picture with your mother and your grandmother, what happened to her and her children.
I went to France.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
there's an Armenian community in France also right now, yeah. Marseille and so forth, in Paris also, yeah.
But she was forcibly married to a Turk.
Oh, yeah.
Had a family with him.
Yeah.
And her Armenian children.
I wasn't thinking
including
about
the little girl that was in that picture.
Yeah.
Were all taken into an orphanage, and she wasn't able to communicate with them for years and years.
30 years, yeah.
Yeah.
She eventually left the family and went to Marseille, yeah.
Had children, half Turkish children, like the ones that you're talking about, and eventually we have a wonderful picture of her in an Arab-looking, like a hijab kind of thing.
It's my wife, Chris, by the way. She isn't a plant. She's not a plant.
And mention Artsakh too.
No, that's too much. No, that's too, no.
So, one of the great sadnesses in our family, this is my husband, is that his father did not live to see the United States recognize the Armenian genocide. And strangely enough, is when I came into the family as an outsider, as an Eldar. My birthday is April 24th, and I was worried about my father-in-law, very much about seeing this as a harbinger of something, right? But I do want to say that, and some of my friends here have heard us say this, one of the Armenian phrases that was used is, when you hear an Armenian laugh, it's because you know that he survived.
Very nice. Very nice.
Well, when My understanding is when Armenian immigrants came to this country, they talked about the genocide every week. It was a constant discussion. My family was the opposite, never came up. But both my parents were Armenian. My father came before, my grandfather got him out before the World War I because of the draft. And my mother, of course, was a survivor. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of our government, could you say more about Morgenthau, what role he played? Because he obviously knew what was going on and tried to get Wilson and others.
Yeah, what I tried to get across was that the missionaries and the consuls in the Ottoman Empire, go back and forth, it's technically still the Ottoman Empire, did send reports from the missionaries and so forth to Istanbul. And Morgenthau was aware of what was going on, and he sent the reports to Washington. And some people wanted the United States to declare war on the Ottomans, on Turkey. That didn't happen, partly because the missionaries were there. Because if we declared war, then the missionaries would be in trouble there. They were not, you know, whatever you think about missionary work, you got to give them a lot of credit. You realize that in the 19th century, going to be a missionary in the Middle East meant essentially a 2-month voyage in overland to get where you're going, into a hostile environment in terms, 1 out of 3 missionaries died. 1 out of 3, usually by disease there. You're going into an area where, first of all, totally different environment. You don't have the things that you had in this country in terms of water, clean water, and so forth. Yet they stayed for years. And some young women went on their own into missionary groups. Absolutely amazing, it really is. And I try to get across to you is that the results of their work is still there in terms of 2 or 3 universities in the Middle East are still there that were set up by missionaries like Robert College, which, by the way, they're mainly Christians going there, and the Robert College in particular was a means by which Armenians could get an education. If you went to Robert College, you got an education, which then meant you could jump to the United States.
Oh, wow.
When my mother was in an orphanage, she had 2 brothers here. One at the University of Michigan and one at Yale.
Wow.
Pretty amazing, you know, to think about it. And that was because the education in a small village of 300 people, families, schooling in the local college, schooling at Robert College meant they had an ability to move across the ocean. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And the missionaries were females.
No, there were males too.
There were males.
There were males, yeah. The question was whether they were all females. No, there were a lot of males. There were husband and wife teams, some that went. But a lot of them didn't come back. They just didn't. And what's interesting is they left diaries too. And people don't leave diaries anymore. I mean, for a historian, diaries are wonderful because they every day they write down what happened, and you can look at the results of what happened. It's a trove, just a chest of wonderful things for if you're doing historical work. Yeah.
Just a joke. I told I went and did professional day at my son's elementary school, and I warned them that their tweets and text messages would be a historian's gold mine, and they all looked terrified.
Well,
I was like, we will be looking through all of that in the future. And they were like, ooh.
yeah.
You mentioned that the Tufts themselves still don't accept that the genocide.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You mentioned that the Tufts themselves still don't say that the genocide is real, and they try to downplay it. But we are in more of a information age with access to things. Like, is there censorship to help keep their narrative the truth, or is it unraveling as the time passes because people access to other resources?
That means you have to go look for them though. That's the problem. You're right that there are a lot of ways of finding out what actually happened. Sometimes it's debatable, of course, but you have to go look for them. And you don't look for them on the tweets and so forth. I'm sorry, being my age, I despise the Facebook and so forth. I'll never do that.
Do you feel there's not enough publicity, as it were, on
Organized
organized
publicity.
to,
I think if you want the publicity's there, it's the lobbying. I think lobbying, if you ever want to get anything done on your local level, on the state level, and the federal level, you have to lobby. You have to get out in the streets. I mean, if you look at the various, women here, you're sitting here, you can vote. In the 19th century, ladies, if you were married, you couldn't even own property.
That's right.
It wasn't in your name.
or vote?
And the change came about not because men said all of a sudden, well, let's give them the right to vote, because you went out in the streets and you complained and you marched and so forth. It's the only way you change things around here.
Absolutely.
Same thing with African Americans.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Thank you so
thank you,
much.
thank you.